It is PC build time, ladies and gentlemen. And that screen has just gone off. Technical difficulties, guys. Technical difficulties. Hold on. Hooray! It's back. And as I was trying to say, it does unfortunately look as if the next generation of NVIDIA graphics cards has unfortunately been delayed. So chances are, if you're on the market for a gaming PC, then something like the RTX 3070 might actually be quite a good value bet. I mean, it's now available for less than the RRP if you know where to look. So let's build ourselves a kick-ass gaming PC. And as always in this video, we're going to be showing you all of the parts that you need for a price to performance 3070 gaming PC. We show you everything that's good about it, everything that could be improved, and of course we're going to show you those all-important gameplay benchmark numbers so you know exactly how this thing performs. So get ready to navigate your way through this high refresh rate 1440p journey after a short word from this video's sponsor. The Corsair K70 Pro Mini is the ideal 60% wireless keyboard for gamers who want to truly make it their own. With hot swappable Cherry MX key switches, customizable keycaps, a replaceable accent bar, and a removable USB-C cable, you have end-game level customization. Grab yours today with the link below. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to announce that Fractal are finally working with PC Centric. It's only taken, how many years I've been doing this now? About 10 years. And for the first video where they're helping out, they have sent over their Fractal Pop Air case. And I really like the look of this. It does almost remind me of like a mix between Be Quiet's 500DX and then the new NZXT H510 Flow. Names are starting to get a bit confusing. But as you can see, we actually have some color. There are some color options available with this. You can get yourself like pink, orange, blue, black, white, whatever you want, as long as they sell it. And I'll tell you right now, this case is going to be a massive hit because it comes in at around about £100. I've seen the white one for around about 82. And when you think the size of it, you can actually fit a lot of hardware inside this. So this is going to be perfect regardless of whether you're doing a more entry-level build or something super high-end where you want to fully kit this thing out. It seems as if they've done loads of cool things with this, like actually accessing all of your hard drives and things from the bottom, proper ventilation with this mesh panel that removes from the front, pops off for lunch like so. Absolutely loads of colour inside this thing. I'm not sure I'm a massive fan of the orange personally, unless I was going to do something crazy with like custom loops or something. I'd probably go for the blue or maybe the black or the white, but maybe I'm a bit boring. And then it's when you look around the back that you can start to see some of the cost-saving measures that have gone into this to actually keep it at that magical £100 price point. And then in terms of included accessories, you don't actually get too many things as standard, but this is actually a case that has been designed to be upgraded. It comes with loads of different modular pieces. I've got some of them with me. So some of the optional accessories are a USB-C cable, so you can actually have USB-C to your case at the front. And then if you want to add more drives, you can get more drives, but you should be able to fit pretty much most of what most people are going to be using inside this as standard. This is a board from ASRock. It's their Pro RS and it's a B660 motherboard. It is definitely a little bit on the cheaper side. I think if I was going to be doing this from scratch again, I'd probably look to spend around about £30–40 more on motherboard personally, but this is going to be absolutely fine. It's going to have all of the features that you need, and it will actually allow you to actually upgrade some of the other components within the same budget. It's not like the motherboard's going to really give you any more performance, but it is fundamentally going to support our CPU. And here we've got the i5-12600K. And the reason that these 12th gen Intel CPUs are really worth buying is down to the fact that the i5s now do come with some efficiency cores if you're looking at the higher end ones, which means if you are wanting to do other things on your PC other than just game, then you do actually get a little bit of capability there as well. So you just open up the slot, gently drop it in, push this cover back down, hold it in place, and then the top piece will come off like that in spectacular fashion, and then you have a locked down CPU ready to move on to the next step. We're then going to move on to step number 2, which is to install our SSD and our RAM. Again, you want to do all of this on the box because it's just much easier rather than reaching into the case. That will be a little bit more tricky and probably not as well illuminated. And you laugh at that, you think I'm funny now, but when you come to do this and you're sat around your dining table and you can't really see anything, I'll be laughing from here. It's my sixth sense. PC gamers struggling to install components. Pressing swiftly on, let's talk about our memory. So this RAM is from Kingston, it's their Fury Renegade, and this is a 16GB kit running at 3600 MHz, which is pretty much the sweet spot for gaming. But the honest truth is that at the moment, DDR5 for gaming doesn't really make sense because the RAM is a lot more expensive, the boards are also more expensive, and you're not really getting any extra performance. I think on laptops it's a slightly different story, but on Team Desktop, just stick with DDR4 if you can for now. Just open up slots 2 and slots 4, pick up your lovely RGB memory, make sure the groove on the memory matches the groove on the motherboard, and then just gently lower it down, give it some purchase, and it just clicks into place. But anyway, next up we're going to install our SSD. It is the Samsung 980 Pro, and this is a really funny story actually. By PC gaming standards, if you told anyone normal, they would not laugh. Because when this launched, it was actually too expensive to really recommend to anyone that didn't want maximum future-proofing or really had a need for all of this speed. But times have changed, and most importantly, the price of this is barely any more expensive than the PCI Gen 3 drives. This is a Gen 4 drive, and it is super fast, and when you think about things like direct storage that are right around the corner, this is going to give you insane read and write speeds that in theory should translate into better game speeds. And when it's not really that much more expensive than a Gen 3 drive, it is a bit of a no-brainer now. So just remove it from the box. It's not in here. It's in a different build. I don't know where it is. Well, my recommendation definitely does still stand, but if you do want to grab yourself even more of a bargain, you can grab the normal 980, that is Gen 3. It's just not as fast or as future-proof, but if you can get this for a much cheaper price than the 980 and you're not fussed about the game load speeds, then this is definitely going to be a good way to go. But if there's not that much difference between this and the Pro, I would recommend going for the Pro. All I'm doing now is removing the M.2 heat shield from this top slot. Make sure you remove the protective cover. Then grab your SSD, gently place it in this top slot and push it down. Grab your heat shield, lower this back over the top of everything, then use those same screws to lower it back into place. And here's where things get incredibly exciting, because every now and then I get something delivered to my door that makes me go, you what? And this is one of these things. It came with a pack of RAM that I am actually still yet to use because it's DDR5. This is not an SSD, oh no. This is a fake RGB SSD that you can put on a motherboard to make it look better. I mean, if this is not the dream product that everyone needs in their PC, I don't know what is. But I thought it'd be fun to actually put it in this one and at least see if it looks all right, because this is only going to properly function if you've got a cheaper motherboard that you don't have heatsinks on. Let's put it at this bottom one, look, there we go. Does that look better? I guess we'll have to see when we turn it on. And at this point, you might be thinking we've got our motherboard complete. But you'd be wrong, because you always want to think about the cooler next. And at this price point, I honestly would recommend that you spend around about £40 to £50 and grab yourself an air cooler. However, last video, loads of people complained saying, it doesn't look good, all you do is use air coolers. What about some RGB radiators and all-in-ones? I mean, that's what I imagine the comments sounded like. So if that was you, then today is your lucky day, as Fractal have also sent over their Lumen S24 RGB. And I would wager this is going to look absolutely incredible in our system. So if you want something that is going to be very quiet, give very good cooling potential, and obviously look incredible, then this is going to be worth buying. But it is around about £100, £110 at the moment. So that is definitely not an essential part of a more price to performance gaming PC. Do it if you really love the look or you specifically want an all-in-one. To me, this actually looks as if the pump is embedded within the radiator, so they've gone down the MSI route rather than having the Azatec pump that is usually within this little head. If you are building on Intel 1700, if you're using an older version of this cooler, you will need a 1700 bracket, and you can get this through Fractal. I don't know if it's free. You might have to pay like postage and packaging or a very small amount of money, but you will need this to actually fit this cooler to this motherboard. But this is actually the case with most coolers these days. The companies are catching up, but if you're going to go for 12th gen, please make sure you do buy an appropriate cooler, or at least have the appropriate mount. We want backplate and screw, and then this retaining washer. Pick up the motherboard and then feed this through the holes at the back. Get these little plastic standoffs and just poke those through the holes that are now on your board. And then I believe your motherboard is ready to install in the case. I've just realised I'm very appropriately dressed for this video. But to get the board inside the case, the first thing you need to do with this board is to actually grab the I/O shield that comes in the box. And you just gently line this up with the big hole at the bottom I say at the bottom, it's very much at the top. What am I talking about? I'm talking rubbish. But then you can pick up the whole case, make sure you've got all of the screws and things out of the bottom first. Then just pick up your motherboard and lay it down gently over all of the pre-applied standoffs so that all of these ports very neatly line up with the I/O shield. Then you're going to want to grab your bag of screws. I would strongly advise that you do keep your case down flat until you've properly screwed it in, but these holes are very easy to locate. They're just dotted around the board. At this stage then, we very much have ourselves a bare bones gaming PC, but there are definitely quite a few more steps before we can get this thing up and running. To keep things as neat as possible, you want to make sure that you minimize the route that the cables take from its entry point to its destination. So as an example, here is the USB 3, and you can see our USB 3 port is just here, and then just plug it in just here below the USB Type-C. The power switch is a little bit more fiddly as this connects down here at the bottom right. There is a little block diagram in your motherboard that will show you exactly which pin is which, but the power switch is the top right, the power LEDs the top left, reset bottom right, HD LEDs bottom left. Boom, I've done this before. Our penultimate cable is the HD audio, which is always at the bottom left of your motherboard, unless you've got some ITX system, I suppose. And then if you're not using USB-C, at this point you will be done. But today we are, so we'll grab our little USB-C cable out of Fractal's box, and you'll see you get two ends, one that connects to your motherboard and then one that plugs into the case. We use a screwdriver to unplug the dummy cover that's located at the top. Remove this, grab the real deal, give this a push into place, and then screw that back down. That was actually very simple. Try and keep this as neat as possible by following the cable management route that they've already done. Then just feed it through and connect it above the USB 3. Believe it or not, that was probably one of the hardest bits out of the way. All we need to do now is get our last three components installed. And the first thing I'm going to grab upside down is the power supply. And I'm going to talk about this with an air of caution because this is clearly going to be a very good power supply. It's platinum rated, so it's going to be very good for efficiency. 860 watts is their Ion Plus 2, but it's around about 145-ish pounds at the moment, which I think is too much money for a rig like this. If you want to do that, brilliant, because power supplies last a very long time, but I don't think it's strictly necessary. However, the reason I'm still using this today is because you can actually get, I think it's the 750 watt version, for around about £50 less. Because this is a modular power supply, all of these cables aren't actually pre-fitted. You only need to use the ones that you actually need for your rig, which gives you a much tidier overall system, especially in something like this where you've not got loads of cable management grommets and things. This absolutely huge one is called the ATX connector, and this plugs in just above the USB Type-C. But as we discussed earlier, you will be needing some SATA. You also have these PCIe connections that most graphics cards will need to actually get the amount of power to run properly, as the motherboard can only supply, I think it's 75 watts. And then last, but certainly not least, you're going to need a CPU connection, which is up here at the top left. But in a case like this, where you don't actually have that much clearance, I would strongly advise, if you do have a modular power supply, you connect this to the motherboard now, then feed it round. Otherwise it can get really difficult to actually plug everything in. It becomes a bit of a nightmare. There we go. Hooray, we're in, we're in. Trust me, that would be about 20 times more difficult if you couldn't actually get to it in the first place. So your cable will start to trail down here at the back, and we'll tie everything down to keep it as neat as possible. But for now, we just want to grab our power supply, plug in our CPU, make sure the fan is facing downwards, and then just gently line this up with the slot at the back, rather noisily I might add. Use the screws that come in the box and just get this fitted. And this is the bit that actually unusually often takes a bit of time, because not only do you have to get this thing assembled, but you've got to decide where it goes, maybe unplug some fans, move them around. It can take around about half an hour, which compared to the rest of the stuff is actually quite a long time. We do have some RGB fans that should actually match the ones we have in the case. I'm not sure if they're exactly the same, but as they're Fractal, they're going to work off the same sort of system. But if we can, I do want this to go at the top. But if our RAM is a little bit too tall, we might have to put it at the front. So I'm going to test this now by grabbing a fan, making sure it's actually blowing into the radiator, so we're using this as an exhaust. Grabbing the screws out of the radiator box, and then fitting this into place. And then we can do our test fit. So this needs to line up with the screw holes on the top, which it doesn't look as if it's going to. Hate radiators, I told you, they're literally the worst thing. Hate them. Absolutely hate them. Now, if I'm honest, I am actually starting to get a bit frustrated, because inside my box, I do also have this extended radiator bracket. But why this wasn't part of the original design, I don't know. The screws that they're telling me to use, some of them fit in fine, others don't. And it just seems like a bit of a band-aid over a problem that shouldn't really have happened in the first place. But I will press on. I hate radiators. I mean, I like the end result, but installing them is always a pig. Radiator offset bracket installed. This should now fit, in theory. Yes, there we go. It does just screw in at the top. But once you've done that, we can then finally actually get this attached to our CPU. We do need to remove this little standard bracket and replace it with the Intel 1700 one though. If you're buying this new, it will actually come with some thermal paste pre-applied, but if you're reusing this cooler or you're buying it used, we'll need to add your own. Doesn't really matter, but don't use none. You also need this little RGB cable that comes in the box and then connects to the pump head, just like so. But the rest is very simple. You just line up the cooler with those little holes that are poking through. Give it a good push. But once it's touching, just add the screws and give it a tighten with a screwdriver. Right, with that all out of the way, the last real thing to do before we install the graphics card is to actually get all of these other cables properly plugged in. And the only thing really we need to do is just connect the RGB and the fans that were actually on the front and the rear to the motherboard. The addressable RGB, I will just plug them all into each other and just connect one header at the top of the motherboard. It is finally time to add in our 3070 to the PC. And this is the Founders Edition that I haven't actually used in ages. Nvidia haven't stopped selling them, they just usually sell out very quickly, but you might actually be able to get one of these now. And this is still my favorite cooling solution of all of the cards, because the 3070 didn't produce too much heat or noise, and this cooler was able to stay cool and quiet, and as you can see, it looks pretty darn tasty. It was only the problem with the, well, the Alien. But to get this slotted in, it's very straightforward. Just unplug the two slot connectors on the back of the board. Maybe with less noise than I do. Then you can pick up your RTX 3070 and just gently line it up with a very large slot at the top. Give it a bit of a push, and then just fix it back down with the same screws. And then last, but certainly not least, give it some power just by plugging it into the adapter. And then, as is traditional on this channel, here is your completely unfiltered look at what your PC will appear like before you've done any cable management. And I have to say, RGB fans and radiators do make things more complicated, but this was still one of the more complicated builds that I've done recently, just because there's so many different things to do, and that radiator bracket really did annoy me, if I'm honest. Hate them. Absolutely hate them.
I hate radiators.
But let's put this back together. Plenty of room on the side panel actually, so you don't even need to cable manage if you don't want to, because that all went on fine. Grab our monitor, a keyboard, which is this one from Ducky that Overclockers UK sent out because, quote, they wanted me to have one. And to be fair, that is a pretty cool little keyboard, isn't it? Love the tiger on the front. Very clicky. Didn't realise it was that small. This is actually ideal. Oh, but I can't put it off any longer. Now it is time for the moment of truth. It took me so long today. Please work. We have lights. No fans spinning just yet. Well, the ones at the front do. Have I not plugged these in? Oh, something's gone wrong. But we have a signal. That is the most important thing. The fans can be remedied. Here we are. That is very relieving, actually. And I think we have Windows pre-installed as well on this SSD, so in theory it should load back in. I've spotted the problem with the fans. Don't do this, but I think I just plugged them in wrong. There we go, you see? You see? There's no RGB on the front too either, but other than that, we're spot on. And overall, I have to say, this is a pretty cracking looking system. I think the thing I like about it the most is that it does stand out. It's definitely not your bog standard gaming PC. It's very easy just to chuck a load of similar looking components in and have a very similar looking build. But the orange here is actually working for me quite nicely. You could maybe match this with the RGB. I love the look of the cooler as well. I think this is one of the best looking ones on the market, no doubt about it. The RGB RAM, the RGB fans, it all works together. Even that RGB SSD kind of works, doesn't it? It adds a little bit more interest. It's only the RGB on the right-hand side of the motherboard that does appear to be showing off some cables that I'd rather people didn't see. But of course, we're not done here just yet. Oh no. We also need to test the performance of this PC, so let me get some games installed, and we'll be right back. And just like magic, we're here! Should we play some Fortnite? And here we are, jumping out of the battle bus, this time at 4K absolute max settings, but with DLSS set to the quality mode. So this is pretty much worst case scenario really for your 3070. But as you can see, it is still absolutely smashing it. If you do want to play this on a 4K TV or grab yourself a 4K monitor, in a fair amount of titles, you will actually be having a very good experience. Don't go thinking that this can't handle 4K, because it absolutely can, as long as you are aware of the limitations. Oh! Why didn't the chute open? Do you have a parachute in Fortnite? I swear you do. I honestly didn't know that was going to happen. Let's try that again then, shall we? This time dropping out of the battle bus at 1440p, but again with DLSS set to the quality mode. And as you can see, 4K is definitely a whole lot more demanding than 1440p, as here we're able to properly get our cake and eat it with around about 140 FPS, which is going to be perfect for a super competitive experience in the latest titles. And then last but certainly not least, we have some 1080p. I don't really think most people are going to be using this if you're looking to spend around about what? £450 on a graphics card, but if you did want to go down this route, around about 150 to 170 FPS at 1080p, definitely nothing to frown about. Let's move on though to some other titles, and here we have some Apex Legends, but in order to actually get you the proper thermals, let's put the side panel on. Now this is a title that does not have Nvidia's DLSS, so you're not going to get quite as high a frame rate as you might in Fortnite, but I think around about 74 FPS at 4K max settings is definitely not a big problem for most people, especially bearing in mind the chances of you actually playing at 4K is going to be pretty slim. Obviously this is a multiplayer title, so you're going to value frame rate over visual quality. But I mean, having said that, we're actually getting around about 100 FPS now that we've landed, so this is really not a bad option. But we've lowered it down to 1440p now to see what this thing can properly do, and immediately we're getting about 160 FPS, because there is just no need to play at 4K when you can get this level of frame rate with a visual quality that's not actually that far off. The whole system is ridiculously quiet, by the way. Obviously this is it running flat out, it's playing a game, 100% GPU utilization, and there's basically no noise. This actually competes very well with the 500DX from Be Quiet, but obviously bear in mind we are using a very good CPU cooler as well, but this is why having a case with plenty of mesh and airflow on the front really does help, because the graphics card doesn't need to make a load of noise, because it can get fed nice, cool, fresh air. Thermals are handled pretty well too, around about 74 degrees on the GPU, and even though it's not properly flat out, around about 55 on the CPU, so I don't think thermals or any sorts of acoustic things are going to be a problem for you. But obviously those games are a little bit easier to run, so what about something that is not? Some Cyberpunk 2077. Well, remember when I said in Fortnite that this can play some games at 4K? Well, if you want to do Cyberpunk at Ray Tracing Ultra at 4K, this is going to struggle. To be fair, it's actually doing a fine job. I mean, I wouldn't want to play like this, but if you do want to grab some screenshots, this should be absolutely fine, because this is a playable experience, but with around about 30 FPS, this is not really the experience I would want for my game personally, though it is nice to have the option. But of course, we can lower down the resolution to 2560 by 1440 with DLSS, and just like that, all of our problems seem to have disappeared, other than me not being able to actually land any of those shots with a sniper. Around about 55 FPS, so still below the magical 60, but if you do want to properly take advantage of the next generation visuals, if you like, then this is a great way of doing it, even though you're not getting that stupendous 100 FPS. I mean, you probably can increase it. Let's turn ray tracing off for a second. And now we're getting around about 75, 80 FPS, so it's a fair increase, and it is going to make the game that little bit smoother, a little bit more playable, but either way, it's nice to have the option of both. So there we are then, our Fractal Pop Build with an RTX 3070. Let me know your thoughts on this. What do you like? What do you dislike? I would say that I didn't enjoy building in the case, but it was more just because of the radiator and the amount of cable management and stuff you have to do around the back. It's not quite designed for it as I would personally like, but once it's built up, it doesn't really matter. I think the quality of this case is excellent. Airflow is top notch. So I think this is going to be a great case. Just be aware that if you want to put a radiator at the top, it's going to be a little bit meh. If you have enjoyed this video, then absolutely smash the like button and get yourself subscribed. And as always, if you do want to check out current pricing on this PC, anything that's in it, or in my personal setup, you can find that linked down below. And while you're down there, make sure you check out Corsair's phenomenal K70 Pro Mini wireless. You get per key RGB lighting, a 360-degree RGB light edge, and up to 32 hours of battery life with the lighting enabled, as well as a tremendous up to 200 hours with the lights off. Grab yours today with the link below. But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll catch you in the next one.